Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today we have the pleasure of watching Don't Worry Darling playing in the infamous VK3601H. This vehicle was my first ever tier 6 tank back in the day. It was actually the first tank that I ever got a Kolobanovs in as well. Although that Kolobanovs I think happened in about 2011 and I didn't even really think about the significance of it. Back in 2011, finishing off 5 low health tanks at the end of the game didn't really feel as if it was that much of an achievement, with quite often people playing like absolute terrible bots, or alternatively you just setting up your binoculars and being able to outspot vehicles that most likely had 50% crews and the players had absolutely no idea what they were doing. Oh, how things have changed over the last 12 years. Arguably, still, a lot of players still have no idea what they're doing, but I have to admit, the amount of players who play this game competitively, or very well, have substantially increased, which means that we have fantastic opportunities of watching awesome players like Don't Worry Darling crush some games of World of Tanks. And as you might have seen from the thumbnail and the title, this one is going to get very spicy. So firstly, let's talk about the equipment that Don't Worry Darling is using. This is from a game earlier this year where I wasn't using the modification that shows equipment inside the battle, but luckily it showed as we were loading in, and they are using a gun rammer, vents, and a durability device. And what a tank to use a durability device on, right? 1,360 hit points on a tier 6 heavy. Don't Worry Darling is going to town on the opposite number on the enemy team. It's crazy to me to think that back in the day, tier 6s would have like 800 hit points at most on the heavies, and now they're packing 1,360, as much as tier 8 tanks used to have back in the OG World of Tanks. Scary stuff. And when you have more hit points, that allows you to go further into the battle, hopefully make more trades, or be able to deal with the most dangerous tank on the enemy team, like the VK3601, in a lovely matchup like this. If only Don't Worry Darling can manage to get through this BDR and the VK without losing too many more hit points. Oh, there you go. Now things start to get a little bit juicy. The only other 2 serious threats on the enemy team will be the T-3485M and of course the ARL, if that ARL is able to get out that 105mm and use gold on that tank, which has just an extra 10 alpha damage, because why not? World of Tanks, one of the final remaining relics of World of Tanks pay to win, like pure pay to win past, when gold rounds truly were only available for gold until 2012. Okay, so Don't Worry Darling, having now vanquished the VK3601 down the alleyway, has decided to retire into a position where they can have a more leisurable approach at sniping at all of the enemy tanks who are going to make their way down the hill. Bizarrely enough, even though Don't Worry Darling is using a premium consumable and has bounty equipment on this tank, they've elected to not use camouflage on this vehicle. I guess it is a heavy and you could argue it doesn't really matter, but remember the bonus that camo provides you is a flat amount, and so it will help in some scenarios in your heavy tanks trying to advance between positions without getting spotted, or maybe if you just wanted to be sneaky inside a bush. So Don't Worry Darling clearly knows the Himmelsdorf map very well. They're making their way back into the windows, trundling past the bishop on their team, and this will allow them to hopefully finish off the Hetzer. Oh, what a gold round! Bounces off the well-angled German armor. That is preposterous. However, the second one, the Hetzer's not quite so lucky. The gold rounds on this tank have 194mm of penetration. Don't Worry Darling is choosing to use the 88mm on this vehicle and not the Konish that a lot of people, including myself, would want to use. So that is going to give Don't Worry Darling improved alpha damage, which will hopefully allow them to make better trades. And in this kind of a matchup, you don't need the extra penetration like you could use on the Konish. So Don't Worry Darling is already up to 2,000 damage. Make that 2,300 damage nearly. This would be a fantastic game for a tier 7 tank. But Don't Worry Darling is only just getting started, ripping and tearing through the enemy tanks as they make their way down the hill. And even though Don't Worry Darling is up to 4 kills, this game is still very much a 2 versus 10 scenario. With full health OP tier 4 tanks like the Matilda making their way down the hill, Don't Worry Darling is going to have to show all of their marksmanship, but they're slowly getting whittled down by even these tier 4 tanks, and all that's left on their team is an IKV-65 holding up the other flank. And momentarily, Don't Worry Darling is going to make me worry quite a lot. As they are going to find themselves in a 1 versus 10 scenario as the IKV. is about to meet their grisly demise down the 2 lane. So now, what? Up to 3,800 damage, doing amazing work. And there we go. The IKB dies just before Don't Worry Darling finishes off the Chi-He, meaning that momentarily it was a 1 versus 10, which, Don't Worry Darling, quickly changes into a 1 versus 8 remaining tanks. And talk about 8. How about a 1 versus 8? We're reduced from a 1 versus 10 with only 8 hit points. Oh gosh, looks like that AMX ELC BIS drives a bit like I do in an EBER. Whizzing around the corner, failing, there's the ARL, ricochets the 105mm shell from the tier 6 French tank destroyer. And he's got 2 marks of excellence. It doesn't look like that ARL is that bad of a player. But Don't Worry Darling, with their 8 remaining hit points, has got something to say about who is going to win this day. However, Don't Worry Darling is now down to only 3 gold rounds left in this game. Up to 4,400 damage, already destroyed half the team, and is going to have to destroy half of the remaining enemy team with only 8 hit points if they want to be able to get not only the mother of all Kolobanov's medals, but also the Rezene Heroes medal, which will be for destroying 14 out of the 15 players. It's a possibility, but oh no! Don't Worry Darling misses the shot on the BDR turret, luckily finishes off the ARL, and now you just got to pray for bounces, pray for bounces, pray for bounces. Come on, hopefully the BDR doesn't bounce. They don't even hit. Now, the gold rounds are expended. Only regular rounds left, like a free-to-play VK3601 for the remaining 1 versus 6, which is now a 1 versus 5 and quickly becoming a 1 versus 4. Now, can you believe it? 5,000 damage dealt. The Stuk doesn't quite understand how you're meant to be able to dig out the VK in this scenario. Don't Worry Darling shows some clutch work over the ridgeline there into the Stuk. But bizarrely enough, there's a Matilda still on the hill who now appears, albeit on low hit points. Much lower hit points now. Don't Worry Darling only has 2 minutes now to finish off the 2 remaining vehicles in front of them that are spotted, while the enemy M44 has had enough of their shenanigans and the top tier self-propelled gun is trying to cap. So Don't Worry Darling lurches around the corner, finishes off the Matilda, now up to 12 kills. And that 1 versus 10 is now Don't Worry Darling against 2 self-propelled guns. I cannot believe this. 8 hit points in a 1 versus 8. Now, Don't Worry Darling only has 360 more hit points to deal with on the enemy team, but they can't dilly-dally. Tick, tick, tock. The clock is running out for Don't Worry Darling as he reverses around the corner, I guess trying to bait the shell from the AMX. Oh, clutch shot, just narrowly misses. Now with 1 minute and 10 seconds to finish off the AMX before going for the cap circle, Don't Worry Darling has decided they've had enough, and they just fully reverse out in front of the AMX, and Jaguar on the enemy team doesn't react to the scenario, doesn't put the shell in, and now 55 seconds left. Don't Worry Darling has to find the M44. However, this is a bigger self-propelled gun with a nasty splash radius. And as somebody who recently lost a 1v1 against an artillery at the end of the game, although it was at tier 2, splash, this is something that is giving me a little bit of stress right now. Don't Worry Darling on 13 kills, 5,600 damage in a tier 6 tank. This would be an epic game for a tier 10 vehicle, let alone a tier 6. But Don't Worry Darling is slowly letting the clock run out. 22 seconds left, hasn't managed to find. If they're behind the cap, if they're luckily they're not. If they were behind that little pillbox we see in the cap circle, Don't Worry Darling would have to have a go. But oh my gosh, 10 seconds, 9, 8, 7, the hand is forced. Roll the dice, Don't Worry Darling. 3, 2, 1. 99 base defense points, and now Don't Worry Darling can chill out as the M44 misses. And oh, that's gotta be a good feeling, ladies and gents, boys and girls, to have the clean shot, no stress, for the Rezene Heroes medal for taking down 14 kills, but also a 1 versus 10, of which 8 of those opponents were with 8 hit points. This has to be one of the most tense and greatest endgame carries that I have ever seen, and I love the fact that it was in my first ever tier 6 and a tank that I fell in love with 12 years ago. Well, Don't Worry Darling, I cannot think of a more apt name for this scenario, but you definitely had me worried multiple times through this replay, reversing out in front of the artillery and then leaving it for 1 second to be able to get a clutch shot at an M44 over this ridgeline. That had me stressed, but you know what? I guess you were just adding suspense for for the inevitable what replays highlight, right? And boy, what a highlight this is. An ace tanker for 2,359 base experience, a high caliber for nearly 6,000 damage dealt, the one that nobody gets, the Rizene Heroes Medal for 14 kills, the Kolobanos for standing alone against at least 5, in this case 10, a Defender Medal for protecting the cap circle against the artillery, a Pascucci's Medal for defeating the 2 artillery on the enemy team, a Spartan Medal for ricocheting with less than 10 hit points, and a Steel Wall Medal for blocking 1,900 damage with some great angling of this relatively thick German armor. The only thing that I didn't like is that Don't Worry Darling spammed the mother of all amount of gold ammunition in this game. But to be able to achieve this kind of a result, who cares about losing 46,000 credits? These are medals that some people go their entire World of Tanks career without achieving. And congratulations to you, Don't Worry Darling, on one of the most spectacular, tense, epic, close quarters finishes that I have ever seen in all of my years playing World of Tanks. And so, Don't Worry Darling, congratulations to you, and thank you so much for uploading your replay onto the What Replays website. When I saw this one, I knew I had to share it with the community, and I hope all of you out there loved my commentary on this YouTube video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below, what was the first tank in World of Tanks that you truly fell in love with? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.